Welcome back to GrokTALK, Segment 2, August 9th, 2014. I am here with Skip Murphy. I am Steve McDonald. Mike Rogers is calling online from Ohio, and our guest is on the line as well, and we'll be bringing her on in a second. Just wanted to remind you to visit us at GraniteRock.com, and please go to cnht.org to see what they do. We are available, this podcast, the video, all over. Go to GraniteRock.com. See all the awesome places where you can check us out and listen to our great guests. Speaking of which, our next guest is Emily Sandblade, New Hampshire State Rep from Hillsborough 18, and she is here to talk to us, I believe, about education standards. Emily, how are you doing today?
Hi there. I'm here to talk about the Manchester Academic Standards, which are a bare rework of Common Core, which the Manchester School Board is going to vote on Monday night.
Great. Well, I hear that this has been happening all over, where places first adopt Common Core and then they either reject it outright because of the outcry when people find out this has never been used before, hasn't been tested, hasn't been vetted, or like you're finding out in Manchester, they are kind of rewriting around the edges, tinkering it with a little bit, but basically it's still Common Core, a rose by any other name.
I wouldn't call it a rose, but
the thorns, okay.
Idea.
You can say steaming turd if you want. We don't have to worry about the FCC. So.
Okay. In fact, one of the interesting things about the current standards is it looks like 81% of Common Core got recycled without any modification at all, and then a fair amount of the remainder was just rewritten to be kinder and gentler. Rather than the standard Common Core. There's a little bit of addition in a few places, but mostly it's the same old stuff.
So you guys are calling and leafleting and doing all kinds of stuff. Now,
we're leafleting the neighborhoods like crazy around here right now. We're distributing about 7,000 flyers over about a 10-day period all through Manchester.
Wow.
Yes, we organized the campaign.
It's pretty good. Now, there's some background to this. Originally, I think, was it a few months back, the board had a very raucous discussion with a lot of people showing up about changing the standards, and they had said that they weren't going to do Common Core. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what they said. In fact, Mayor Gassis said that they would develop new standards, that they would be the envy of every school system in the state because they'd be the best in the state. And the reality is according to both Tom Raffio and Bill Duncan, the recently appointed member of the Board of Education. Tom Raffio is the head of the Board of Education. The Manchester Academic Standards essentially are Common Core. So they're coming to the same conclusion that we are when we look at it.
So that really doesn't help the Manchester School Board very much when the outside quote-unquote higher-level Board of Education says you still got the same crap.
Well, they realize that they've got the same garbage out there, but the problem is, and they realize that, so what they've done is they set it to where they release the standards to the public right in the middle of summer when all the parents are on vacation and the kids are out of school and nobody's watching what the school board's doing. And then the school board claimed that, well, they didn't have very many people show up to complain, so therefore it must be okay. Well, we're fixing that.
Well, I'm beginning to see a nasty pattern because coming from Guilford, we are having some issues with the board where they've just basically said, well, during public input, we'll listen, but there's no interaction. There is no accountability. They even codified it where we're coming from the school board where the person was arrested for trying to confront the school board for pornographic materials being presented in a freshman class.
Oh, and yes, I met that gentleman, and I think he's got a lot of courage.
He does. And, the month afterwards, they codified a brand new administrative regulation that said a parent who is disgusted with the material can go see the principal, but that does not mean that they get to address the school board. So here we see elected officials saying we are not going to deign to talk to those that elected us. In other words, making themselves basically unaccountable. And there's another school board that I haven't posted up yet that's basically said the same thing. We'll give you public input at the end of our meetings, but we're not going to talk back. We'll listen, and that's about it. And I'm seeing this over and over and over again. And you do see that the school boards as a whole through the state-level school boards are starting to say, we're going to ramrod through anything we want, regardless of what the parents want. And you're basically telling us the same thing for Manchester, that the school board is basically saying, we're going to make our decision regardless, and we'll put up any flimsy excuse that we can to ram it through. Yes, Mike?
The shorter version of that is your leaders shall not be questioned. You shall not ask questions of your congressional reps. They won't hold meetings. You shall not ask questions of Scott Brown. He's already got his Senate Club membership and he isn't going to give it up, and so on and so forth.
So, Emily, how do you respond to that? Is it a case of just these standards, or is it a case of basically ever threatening school boards, and Manchester is being one of them?
I think you have to pretty much threaten the school boards. And the only thing, speaking as a politician myself, the only thing that politicians consistently understand is pain. And if you threaten their reelection, they sit up and take notice. And what we're doing right now is we're threatening to throw a lot of them out.
Well, and I think that's a good thing. Now, the question would be, Manchester has to, and any town has to spend lots of money in implementing Common Core. And, and I'm looking at this from the Guilford standpoint. They just put in a whole bunch of standards a couple of years ago, retrained, quote-unquote, all their highly qualified teachers, and put in all this new curriculum. Now they're going to throw it out, retrain the teachers, bring in all this other material, and we keep seeing instances of what the Common Core material is, and you're going, what? Those of us who grew up in the 50s and 60s with good grade schools and junior high schools and high schools are going, what are they saying about the Constitution? What are they saying about our history? How are they trying to do math? I'm just a software engineer. I made it through multivariate calculus, but you're a physicist, correct?
Yes, I am.
So you're heavy into the math, and you must be just dying when you see some of these math examples that keep floating up.
Well, what I'm seeing is a situation where we're going to have very few kids who are qualified to go pursue STEM careers successfully. And what we see is that kids that only finish Algebra 2 only have a 2% chance of making it through a STEM program if they even start one at all. And that's a very serious problem because in this country we depend very, very heavily on our technology to sustain our way of life.
Hey, Emily?
And we're already losing that.
Emily, for our readers and listeners who may not have gotten what we've written before, explain STEM.
Oh, STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics careers.
In other words, it's the heavy thinker kind of stuff.
It's math heavy, pretty analytical.
Mike?
Yeah, that is why the Asian students and the Indian imports are so prized by businesses, because we're already succeeding in dumbing down our own kids to the point where they're not employable in the engines that drive America's prosperity.
Well, that's going to become not so doable in the future because there's a couple of things that are happening. One is that the number of foreign students has fallen off somewhat because of 2000, the World Trade Center attacks, and what has happened is the State Department has really tightened up who can get a student visa. So more students are going to European schools and other schools around the world rather than come to American schools because of the difficulty of getting into the United States to study.
They should just cross the border from Mexico.
Well, unfortunately, most of the ones crossing the border from Mexico are not STEM candidates.
No, they're not. But
and that's a problem. So the other major factor that's going on is about half of our technical students in the United States in the colleges are foreign students, which I think is a crying shame. It doesn't say much for American students right now. And the problem is that the foreign countries are developing much faster than they used to. The rate of improvement is phenomenal right now. And a lot of those students who used to stay in the U.S. and go to work for U.S. companies and contribute to the U.S. economy are now returning home. So we can't count on those foreign students to man our power plants or run our computer companies or do whatever we need to have in order to continue to sustain our standard of living. So we have to. This is absolutely critical. We absolutely have to educate our kids well in mathematics, and Common Core is going in the completely wrong direction for that. And if we don't fix this right away, within 20 to 30 years, we're going to be seeing the U.S. become a third world country.
Well, isn't that so?
been making this case for probably 40 or 50 years that we have to better educate our kids because they're not quite keeping up with the best nations around the world, except they're doing it through federal standards, federal coercion, and a complete dumbing down of the standards.
Well, it's not only complete dumbing down, but it's totally untested. And what's worse is that they're imposing it on everybody all at once. And as an engineer, I'm sure you can understand that if you deploy a system without testing and you deploy it to everybody at once, it's just a total recipe for failure. I mean, it's just a disaster in the making.
You know, and I keep looking
because I'm managing 2 software slow rollouts at the moment to prevent exactly that from happening.
Yeah, and you roll out gradually. The other issue here is that we know that the best information that can be acquired for how to do things is always local. And if you're going to have something that's federally centered, you're basically getting rid of the local component, you're getting rid of local information, and you're doing a one-size-fits-all. And we know that monocultures, whether they're in biology or society or engineering or wherever, monocultures don't work. And the real problem with Common Core is it's a monoculture. And once Common Core is imposed, if it gets imposed on the whole country, once it's imposed, there's going to be absolutely no incentive out there to improve it or make it better.
Well, here's another part of the problem that isn't being talked about, but one of the leading proponents of Common Core is the guy who heads up the College Board, which does the SATs and the LSATs and ACT and all the other stuff, and they are incorporating that information into the tests. So now you are cutting off all the alternatives, the charter schools, the private schools, the online schools, the homeschoolers, because unless the college bubble bursts like people like Glenn Reynolds of Instapundit have been predicting for a while, and we're starting to see that now, there is only one test. And I keep looking at, for us as political folks and news junkies, I'm looking at some of the history and the social science, and it's the leftist type crap that always points out to be the blame America first. They don't say the true history. They just say the wrongs of America along history. They don't go into the philosophy. They don't go into the primary material. The reading is being taught from informational, factual type stuff, not the great literature that teaches about the world as we live it. And you go, why are we shortchanging our kids this way?
Well, I ask that frequently. I was privileged to have a very good education, and there is nothing like an excellent education where you're actually taught real thinking, real critical thinking to survive in the world. And what we're doing is we're crippling our children's minds. We're crippling their capability to survive in the future because they don't understand where they've come from. They don't understand the history of the society they're in. They don't understand the basic premises.
Emily, we're going to take a quick break. Stay on the line, and we'll be right back after this.
He tried to make us believe he was a fiscal conservative, but State Senator Jeb Bradley has been deceiving New Hampshire taxpayers. Like a wolf in sheep's clothing, he claimed to be one of us, pretending to blend in, but all along voting like a liberal Democrat. And oh, how he drooled at the opportunity to vote to expand Obamacare, which will result in higher taxes and longer wait times in the emergency room. And now, Senator Bradley is leading the charge to try and pass a Senate bill to prevent us from criticizing his vote. Call Senator Bradley at 603-569-4208 and tell him that we're on to his wolf in sheep's clothing routine. Tell him to stop pretending to be a fiscal conservative and start voting like one. Paid for by Citizens for a Strong New Hampshire.
We are struggling. Rising healthcare costs are part of the problem. Senator Jeanne Shaheen helped create this mess we're in. As a state senator, her bill chased 21 insurers out of our state. It reduced our choices, raised prices for New Hampshire families, and when Jeanne Shaheen supported Obamacare, it limited access to 10 of our 26 hospitals, reducing our choices again. Tell Jeanne Shaheen she's made healthcare worse.
We are back. Mike is back. I guess we lost Mike and we didn't know it. This is GrokTALK, brought to you by GrokTALK.com and the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers, coming to you pretty much every Saturday from 9 to 11 a.m. From Concord, New Hampshire. Next week, we will be broadcasting live from the Londonderry Fish and Game Club. Gubernatorial candidate, I hate that word. Gubernatorial candidate Andrew Hemingway is having a shoot. And it is Londonderry Fish and Game, and we will be there broadcasting the program. I don't know if we'll be on the same hours, because his event starts at 11. Is that correct?
Something like that.
Yeah, but we'll be there.
I'll be there early.
You'll be there early, and we'll see. I'm going to try to be there. It's my birthday next weekend. We'll see. I might show up. Anyway, back to our conversation.
I'll bring the Wi-Fi, and we'll try and get it up to speed to stream the program.
Yes, we had a little bit of difficulty last time, but we shall endeavor to try again.
Okay, so anyway, back to the conversation.
Emily, you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so we were talking about Common Core teachings, and hamstringing our students, and frankly, it gives me a rather dismal feeling of going forward. Now, that may make me eminently employable for the rest of my life if I so choose, and given the way that Social Security is going, that may have to be it. We may have seen the golden age of retirement pass into the mists of history here in the United States. But that's okay. I enjoy what I do. I get to help people. I get to solve problems. I get to work with computers and still do some software engineering on the side and all that other stuff. But it doesn't say very good things. And, one of the things I want to ask you, we see this the illegal alien kid invasion, where most of them are teenagers, most of them coming up from Central America. Very few of them are even literate in their own languages. What kind of effect is this going to be on the poor districts that get all these kids? We see that the Obama weaponized administration is certainly dumping on Arizona. We see that Lynn, Massachusetts is already crying out, "Stop, we can't take any more. You're driving us into financial ruin." What kind of, and Manchester has a big refugee problem because of these NGOs who think they're doing so much nice stuff.
They're getting paid by the head.
Yeah, they're getting paid by the head to dump these people in. The federal government pays for 8 months, and then it's the local governments that now have to not use money that they could be using to educating students, but paying for people who are they're bewildered about being here in America, and take it from there.
Well, in Manchester, as of a couple of years ago, we already had a very significant problem because we had English taught as a second language to speakers of 80 different languages, and we had to employ teachers of those 80 different languages. And teachers who are bilingual, of course, command a higher pay rate than those who aren't. And so as a result, we spent, a couple of years ago, we were spending $8 million a year just on educating students who didn't speak English as a first language.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's pretty significant, and I expect that will rise significantly, of course. Manchester looks like it's going to be the dumping ground for more of these children, and we're going to get stuck with the bill.
Well, I know that with the brouhaha the last week, especially the week and the week before that, in Dover, where 300 Congolese refugees were supposed to be put into housing there, and then over the next 6 years, some of them might become citizens, and then they've got the right of chain migration, so up to 3,000 we're going to come into a small town of 30,000. And I talked with the mayor for quite some time, and she was beside herself. We can't afford this, even just from a school system standpoint. But how are we going to take care of these people after these NGOs, under the guise of we're caring for these people, and they dump them, walk away, and expect the local communities? This is almost a forced, I almost want to say, a challenge to the Third Amendment, the Third Bill of Rights that pertain to the quartering of soldiers in the house. Well, instead of soldiers, these are you're being forced to take care of people that aren't yours to begin with.
Well, that's the problem with any system that rolls out the red carpet to any takers. You end up taking care of a lot of people because there's a tremendous incentive for people to take advantage of that.
And we're seeing right now where President Obama, and I call it determined weakness, where I think he is trying to take us down as being the lone superpower. And I think that if this continues, especially on the southern border and bringing all these other places in, and with the general destruction of our educational system, we are going to be second world, if not third world. I may be called a nativist, Emily, but you know something? I think that we became the greatest country in the world because of some basic principles, and now we're seeing those principles either being ignored or openly scoffed at.
I tend to agree with you.
Mike?
Yeah, what I was going to say is, the towns should simply refuse to deal with these people. There's no reason to put them in the school if they're not citizens and residents. There's no reason to pay for those extra teachers, make the NGOs pay for those second language teachers. And when the money stops, the teachers stop. Let them learn the language the way everybody else learned it when they came here, which is by immersion. I don't expect the government to pay for me to learn Spanish if I travel in South America.
Well, the problem is that how many local communities do you know that are going to outright refuse to take care of the people that are put there, knowing that you've got somebody like an Eric Holder at the DOJ willing to bring the legion of lawyers against you?
Well, and that's the problem, is the Supreme Court has tended to rule in case after case that you have to take care of the illegals. You have to give them medical care, you have to give them education. They get a lot of benefits, even though, they may be recently arrived and have never paid a dime in taxes. They have no investment in the United States. But this is just what it is. So what you're really doing is putting up a great big huge sign that says, here, come here and live for free. And that's really what it comes down to, and that's why we're seeing these hundreds of thousands of kids being shipped without their parents over the border.
Yeah, and a perfect example of that, Emily, is Obama's Auntie Zitouni, who lived in the Boston area for years, even though she was illegal. She was supposed to be deported, and I think because she was Obama's half-aunt, something stepped in, but she lived on taxpayer expense for decades. And you're right, these people who have not been invested, they've come here because they hear perhaps that they get stuff free. It used to be that the streets are paved with gold and opportunity was unlimited. Now it's a case of here's the government apartment, the government food, the government healthcare, the government transportation, the government education. You can live for free. How long can a country last with an outlook like that?
Until it's bankrupt, which is not that far off.
Oh, well...
When you run out of producers, you have to borrow. When you run out of lenders, you have to print. We're already there.
Yeah, the question is when you're $17 trillion in debt, more than $17 trillion in debt, and you're going into debt, another $1.8 trillion a year or so, you're going to run out of people who will loan you money sooner or later. I mean, eventually your credit rating crashes. And the problem is I don't think that point is that far off. I think it's a few years off at most. And frankly, it's really stupid to get into that kind of position.
Look at the number of countries that are trying to de-dollarize and ask yourself how long before pushing on a piece of string becomes the literal problem.
I think it's already becoming a literal problem almost.
Well, the problem is that, we look at the Democrats who have always been known as the big spenders and Obama's determined weakness. But we also are starting to see signs that the Republicans in D.C. are no longer keeping the debt as their number one problem as far as at least campaign. They may campaign about it, but their actions, their legislation, and their votes are saying, with what they're doing lately, increase the debt. So the question becomes, when most people continue to vote their congressman and their senator back in year after year after year, where's the hope?
I'm not sure there is any. Frankly, I don't see the political will in Washington to address the debt at all. And the very first thing that they should be doing is living within their means, which means living within about 57% of the budget that they don't borrow. And that would be the very first start. And there is I see almost no political will at all to go through that kind of cut. I see politicians all up and down the line on both sides of the aisle, all lining up for federal handouts, for federal grants. And this whole school thing, you know, the whole Common Core thing, a lot of the reason it's going through is because of race to the top money.
Yeah.
It's heavily monetarily based.
Emily, you have a lot of our listeners and readers are in Manchester. It's one of our largest single groups. We're almost out of time, so what message would you give them real quick? And if they need to contact you, how would they do that?
Well, the message I'd like to give them is show up for the school board meeting on Monday night at 7 p.m., and even if you don't want to speak, and that's perfectly fine, just being there is enough to convince the school board that their attempt to adopt Common Core is just completely out of line. If they want to contact me, they can contact me at Emily Sandblade, SANDBLADE, at gmail.com.
Okay, and it's Monday, August 11th, right?
Monday, August 11th,
okay, right,
and that's going to be at City Hall. Okay, and if they want to call me, I'll be happy to talk to them. My phone number is 845-3228.
All right, Emily, thank you.
And if you spell it out on the phone, it spells vile cat.
Not everybody does that. That's good. I like that. Well, thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us today.
And thank you very much.
Right.
We'd love to have you in studio at some point soon.
Yep, we'll have you back
I'd love to come.
on something else. All right, have a good weekend.
You too.
All right, we'll
thank
see
you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I have to bow, guys. I have arrived at the memorial service for which I came to Ohio.
All right, Mike, you have a great day. We're going to move on to our next segment in about a minute or two with Susan Olson. Bye. Say goodbye to Mike. We're off the phones. Susan Olson's next. She's going to call us, so she may call in while we've already started the segment.
That means we got to watch Ed, huh?
And we got to watch Ed. Make sure we got to see
Ed Larkin, the Flasher.
So, yeah, that's our thing. There's our music. We've come to the end of another segment. So, everybody in Manchester, you listen, you read, go to the school board meeting, Monday, the 11th, and get your information from Emily. You can go everywhere. I mean, this subject, everybody's really, really fired up about this thing, and they want to, go down there and say, look, these aren't the standards we're looking for.
Yes.
Okay.
These are not the droids you're looking for.
These are not the droids we're looking for. All right, this is...
Although it will create droids.
This is you. Will, zombies. This is GrokTALK, brought to you by GrokTALK.com and the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We will be back in just a few minutes with Susan Olson to talk about the pistol revolver license application changes in New Hampshire. We'll be right back.
Senator Jeanne Shaheen said, if you like your current health plan, you can keep it. That's not true, Senator. 22,000 New Hampshire citizens have been kicked off their insurance plans. Hospitals in Rochester, Concord, and Portsmouth, they aren't allowed to provide care under the exchange. Senator, you were wrong in your comments. You should apologize for your misleading remarks. I'm calling Senator Shaheen at 750-3004 and telling her I want my doctor back. You should too.
Paid for by saberpac.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidate committee.
He tried to make us believe he was a fiscal conservative, but State Senator Dave Booten has been deceiving New Hampshire taxpayers. Like a wolf in sheep's clothing, he claimed to be one of us, pretending to blend in, but all along, voting like a liberal Democrat. He voted to raise your gas tax by another 23%, taking a bigger bite out of our wallets every time we're at the pump. And oh, how he drooled at the opportunity to vote to expand Obamacare, which will result in higher taxes and longer wait times in the emergency room. And now the Senate wants to pass a bill to prevent us from criticizing Senator Booten's vote? Call Senator Booten at 603-203-5391 and tell him that we're on to his wolf in sheep's clothing routine. Tell him to stop pretending to be a fiscal conservative and start voting like one. Paid for by Citizens for a Strong New Hampshire.
Few things are as important as finding the right doctor. And under Obamacare, that's harder than ever. Over a third of our hospitals no longer available. Our doctors no longer covered. Fewer choices, longer drives. No state has been harder hit than us. And even after watching it impact New Hampshire, Congresswoman Ann Custer still supports it. Call Ann Custer. Tell her Obamacare isn't working for New Hampshire.
GrokTV.